Hi, Blake. Thank you very much for joining us today. How are things in Toronto?
Hey James, great. Happy New Year to you, and everything's great. Thank you very much.
Blake, Lithium Ionic is a relatively new company. Provide us with a little bit of background on the company, its formation, and when it went public.
Sure. So we went public in May of 22. So we're a fairly young company. We're still growing, and that's a big part of what we're doing now is trying to get the name out there and talk about it. Started at a 70-cent valuation, so we had a good run since then. Now up in the 160, 170 range and beyond. Um, But yeah, we're really active on the ground. Last year, I think, was really kind of ramping the story up and getting our boots on the ground and moving things forward. Whereas this year, I think we're going to be really, really active, move things very quickly, and be very newsy.
Blake, we often hear about Chile and Argentina and the production of lithium, but not Brazil. Maybe you can provide us with a little bit of background on Brazil and the lithium industry there and how the government has been responding to this new industry.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. We see, the lithium triangle has been so important for so long in South America. Obviously, brine hosted and focus, and now with new batteries and the focus on hydroxide, and with spodumene being able to be processed directly into hydroxide, and high quality material for the new batteries, hard rock lithium has become extremely important. And this is where the East Brazilian pegmatite belt is growing into being one of the most important lithium jurisdictions in the world. And now it brings Brazil into focus, and then companies like a Sigma that have grown rapidly, Latin Resources, which is still underway, and a company like CBL that's been producing for 30 years, are starting to highlight this belt, what a unique geological belt and unique production belt. And certainly we're going to be a big part of that too.
And how is the government being both on a federal level and also a state level? Are they progressive in their involvement within the lithium sector? Are they providing much in the way of incentives for foreign investment?
Yeah, I think we've seen the country be extremely supportive of this. The state has generally been a pro-mining state in Minas Gerais for a very long time, over 100 years, and where some of the most important mines in South America have come from. But I think there's a global green initiative here, that this fits into. And now the government has recognized that the best way to take advantage of this cycle and certainly see the value it creates is to push the exports of concentrate. So they've removed some of the bureaucracy around shipping from the ports, and they've certainly created some tax incentives to help move projects forward, and of course have allowed for permitting to be rapid, or relatively rapid compared to many other jurisdictions in the world. Again, to catch a cycle that fits into a global initiative to move towards battery supported power.
And as you mentioned, permitting can be a rather laborious activity in Canada and the US. How would it compare to Brazil? How fast? When you say it's a lot more faster, maybe you can quantify that.
Sure. I mean, it's not uncommon. I'm Canadian. Obviously, it's not uncommon for Canadian projects to take 4 or 5 years to go through the permitting process. I think it's something that's not always equated into people's view of projects, and the time it's going to take to actually get these things online. Compare that to, say, what our neighbors at Sigma have just completed. It took roughly 6 months.
Blake, you also mentioned that you're very close to a couple of other producers, Sigma and CBL. Maybe you can just give us a sense of how close Lithium Ionic is to those mines.
Yeah, absolutely. So a big part of the reason that this area was interesting in the first place is that one of only two producing lithium projects in the country is 500 meters north of us. CBL has been producing for 30 years. They're now doing about 36,000 tons per annum of concentrate. They were much smaller before, about 8,000 tons. And they actually fed a carbonate and hydroxide plant in country, very small, always designed for really grease and ceramics. But great proof of concept there for how these materials will react at a chemical plant, which is extremely important. Of course, something people don't talk about a lot is how materials are going to be handled at a chemical plant and the quality of the material that goes there. They've been able to ramp up, and I think they're going to continue to try to do that. And then, of course, we saw Sigma complete construction of their project and now ramping up production. And what they're hoping to achieve is a project, of course, much larger. They're going to start with their Xuxa deposit, which is about 4 kilometers north of us. And they're looking to produce over 200,000 tons per annum from that of 1.5% roughly material. And they've got another 55 million tons sitting roughly 2 kilometers south of us as well. So, we are surrounded by really, really rich deposits. The basin is swarmed by these well mineralized pegmatites. The pegmatites are everywhere. It is really about drilling them off. Again, I think we were talking before this, James, but simple projects are the best projects, and the geology here is not overly complicated. They're pegmatites, intrusions that follow structures. We drill them off, they run high grade lithium, and we define them. That's really where we're at and what they were able to do. And it's great having those things go on around us, for sure.
And given that you are close to 2 established mines, I can only assume the infrastructure is already in place and nothing to be concerned of.
No, it's excellent. Paved roads, hydroelectric power, enough power for any concentrate plant that would come online. Again, these are not massive production scenarios compared to other materials that are produced. We are very close to a town called Aracuai, which is a town of about 40,000 people, blue collar town, supplying lots of work and labor, and we're very, very fortunate in that way. Access to port by road, which is of course what Sigma's looking to do as well. So really, it's all you could ask for in a mining jurisdiction.
Blake, I want to move the discussion now toward exploration. You don't have a resource in place yet, but you are working toward one. And so therefore, exploration is very important as you work to grow the size of the deposit and ultimately the resource. Maybe you can just touch on how many rigs you have going and what are the targets?
Yeah, so we have 5 rigs on the go now, and we've been ramping up with a new drill company that actually is drilling much quicker than what we had initially started with. That's helping us achieve our goals much quicker. We're still on pace for a Q1 resource. We're aiming for 15 to 20 million tons. We think that puts us in a project scale with serious economic value. We look at something like phase 1 of Sigma's Xuxa. This is a deposit that's about 17 to 20 million tons, looking to produce over 200,000 tons per annum from that at 1.5%. And they've done some preliminary economics on that show heavily discounted spodumene price of $1,900 a ton, representing a project of nearly $2 billion NPV, post-tax NPV, and over 400% post-tax IRR. So what do we want to do? We want to put out a resource that could support economics like that, scope that, permit that, something to that scale, helps move permits forward quicker, and then we'll continue to come in behind with a resource that will continue to grow and expand, not dissimilar to what they did as well. And we think we have a belt that's going to outline millions and millions and millions of tons, but we want to catch the cycle now with what we've been able to drill so far.
And given that you have 5 rigs working, you must have a lot of drill results, and maybe you can just provide some or touch on some of the results that you achieved in 2022.
Sure. I mean, we've been focusing primarily on an area called Bandera. It was formerly called Area 1. If you go back to the news releases, we have another 6, well, now more like 8 areas that we think are very interesting and well endowed with pegmatites. But so far, that was the area we're drilling, obviously trying to move that resource forward as quickly as possible. And in this area, it's characterized almost identical to what CBL sees at their production site. Essentially, you get repeated and stacked pegmatites that run sort of 5 to 10 meter widths, and you can get into blowout zones that are larger. And you get 1.5 to 2% grades of lithium dioxide, which is extremely high grade, as I'm sure you and a lot of your listeners know. And so down a hole of, let's say, 100, 150 meters, you'll see 3, 4, 5 mineralized zones down that hole. So in this area, it's more swarmed. In an area like Galvani, we saw something wider. We're still doing work on that to figure out exactly what's going on. But here we were seeing 25 to 40 meter widths of 1.5 to 2%. But we got to do more work on the geology there to understand exactly what's going on. And we think Bandera represents an area where we can grow resource quickly. It's located extremely well between, Sigma's Barreiro deposit, which is 20 million tons, and CBL's production just to the north. And then coming into the rest of the year, of course, we're going to test some of our other showings as well, which we're very confident we're going to open up even more resources and even more opportunity in a prolific belt.
And how do those grades compare to what Sigma has?
They're virtually identical. The whole area essentially runs that 1.5% type average grade. It's very much what they would be able to show. So far, what we've seen from any metallurgy has responded as well or better than what's been published from them and CBL. CBL sees the same grades. We're really in an area that is extremely well mineralized with lots of exploration upside.
And you mentioned that you would like to get the resource to 15 to 20 million tons and then release the resource. And then once you do that, what would be the next steps?
We're already working closely with our consultants to scope something around that, see what the engineering would look like, what the mining might look like. Ultimately, we want to scope it as quickly as possible because the last phase of what we're going to look at for permitting, when we start the conversations and communications and get the detailed engineering out, will help with the permitting process. So we want to be in a place where as we put that resource out, we've already been engineering along with that. We can put out something very quickly that scopes it well and then permit behind it so that we can try to complete all those things in 2023.
Blake, I want to move the discussion now toward your balance sheet. Cash is the lifeblood of any exploration company. How much cash do you have on hand and how will you allocate that in 2023?
Yeah, we have roughly $30 million of cash in the bank. We were fortunate to be able to complete a raise in last year in October. We brought in about $25 million at that point. Our burn rate is modest, something around $1 million a month. Even with the land acquisition work we did last year and what we're doing into this year, we think we have lots of runway to complete, an additional 40,000 meter drill program, do more land acquisition as we want to be very active in the area and really become one of the largest companies in the area, and execute all the engineering and permitting we need to do. So we think we have the capital to get through this year and accomplish all our goals.
And you mentioned that you did the raise in October of 2022. You also went public in 2022. And I'm curious if you can give us some color. Who are the participants on both the IPO and also the equity raise? Are the Canadians, Americans, Europeans?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a mix. It's primarily Canadian institutional coverage, though, that's come into the name and really been supportive. And that's really basically because we have been a small Canadian company from the beginning. And the last few months have been about telling this story to even a broader reach. Of course, these stories are extremely interesting in places like Australia, Europe, and USA, depending on where they think your path is going to be. And depending on how they think you might fit into their, plans for supply chain as well. So I think, in this year and certainly as we move forward, the story will grow, the company grows, and we'll probably start to see more participation from groups outside of Canada. Although we have a really good, strong Canadian institutional base.
I want to move on now and move the discussion toward proof of concept. This isn't a presentation on Sigma, but I think it's important to highlight the success and also the economics of the Sigma project, given Lithium Ionic is so close. When did Sigma start exploring and when did they start producing?
Yeah, it's funny. I always try to make our presentation not a Sigma presentation, but it's very hard not to, at least reference some of the work they've done. And of course, I think, to your point, they really started advancing exploration in 2018, and now, fully constructed and moving into production, through 2022 into 2023 here. I just think that that's an incredible story. They've done a great job, and they've certainly also created a ton of value for the people who bought in this story. It really, the reason it's hard for me not to point to it is that a lot of what we're going to try to do is the same, except we're going to try to move a project forward as quickly as humanly possible, in a very unique jurisdiction, permit it quickly, scope it quickly, and move towards that construction. And they've just done a good job of that. And I think that the value that has created for us is any project that is starting out, and everybody knows this with the exploration space, is the questions become, can you define something in that belt? Do you have the support of the government? Do you have social licenses? Are there environmental issues or First Nations or indigenous issues you can't get around? Or, can you get a permit? Where are you going to offtake to? Who's going to buy this? What are the next steps? They're answering and have answered all those questions for us over the last 3 years. And like I said, did it in a very tough environment. You combine that with a project that's been able to successfully produce for 30 years to the north of us, albeit small. Now you answer the other questions. Metallurgically, how does this thing behave? What's it going to behave like at a chemical plant? What kind of product can you actually produce? What kind of grade can you actually come up with, or con grade can you actually come up with? So a lot of the risk that junior companies take on really have been mitigated by where we are and the proof of concept around us. And it just becomes, a project for us to just deliver. We just have to deliver on drilling off these things, showing the scale, showing the growth, engineering them properly, and then, really trying not to mess up is all we have to do now.
And given that the market cap of Lithium Ionic is around 200 million and Sigma's is around 4 billion, there's lots of room for upside for Lithium Ionic.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, that's the story, right? I think Sigma's done extremely well. I think there's probably some room for people to continue to do well. They have a great story and a great name. But if you're looking for that real leverage and torque, it's the same story or similar story coming in behind it with that kind of room for growth. So I think, that's really what, my job has been, is to try to show people that we are coming in behind, and that's the kind of growth potential and upside you're looking at on a project like this. And it moves very, very quickly. It can get there very, very quickly.
And one other point before we wrap it up, but a lot of Australian companies have moved into Ontario and Quebec and set up exploration companies. Have we seen that yet in Brazil?
Yeah, we just haven't yet, and I don't think it's something that we won't see. I think that this is an analog to Western Australia. I mean, this is something they understand very well. It's an Australian company that really has engineered and designed the Sigma plant and is currently working on this belt in great detail. So I do think they're going to see themselves in this space, or we're going to see them in this space, I should say. We haven't seen it yet. We probably will. Certainly the Chinese have been far more aggressive on trying to be a part of this belt, and they are aggressive everywhere. But I think maybe for the Australian investment community, that they've gone to jurisdictions they know well, and that they've been successful in previously, and they'll soon turn their eyes to this area.
Blake, as we wrap up, can you summarize what investors can expect in terms of news flow from Lithium Ionic throughout 2023?
Absolutely. We're going to be newsy. I think we were fairly newsy in 2022. We think that's important. We've seen a lot of drill results. We saw a lot of drill results in 2022. We saw met results. We saw land acquisitions. I expect to see the same and more in 2020, or this year in 2023. And again, resource engineering, scoping, moving through permit, really expect to be in a position in 2024 that you and I are sitting down, around this time and talking about some huge milestones from the company, maybe some new partnerships and paths forward on how to construct, build, and ultimately have represented a great deal of growth for the investor base and the company as well. So Should be a really huge year. 2022 was successful, but 2023 I think can be a lot better.
Well, it sounds like you and your team are going to be very busy throughout 2023. That was a great introduction, a great overview of Lithium Ionic, and I want to thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to the upcoming resource in the near future. Once again, thank you.
Thanks for the time.